Hi, I'm Chris, a domestic violence and family law attorney in Texas. You are listening to perhaps the realest podcast on earth. I'm here today to talk about the dangers of alcohol in domestic violence situations. I'm not going to say alcohol is the cause, but based on what I see, there is definitely a correlation. So before I run you through my analysis, I'm going to go ahead and just skip to the last chapter and give you the bottom line up front. I personally do not drink alcohol at all, and I'll tell you why. I used to, but not anymore. And that was over 7 years ago. I am not a prude, and I definitely do not drink for religious reasons. But I will tell you what I am. I'm a disabled combat veteran with Appalachian ancestry. I am rated at 100% by the VA, and I'll go ahead and gloss over a few details, and I don't want to bore you too much with the facts, but I will say this. After Iraq, I learned that alcohol was not my friend. I remember the last time I drank alcohol. It was a glass of wine. About over 7 years ago. A few days later, my wife told me she was pregnant. When I learned that fact, something switched inside my brain, and any desire to drink alcohol completely left me. It was definitely the knowledge that I was going to be a father, and for the first time I was really able to start seeing things in HD. The social problems in my community, what I was able to observe as a soldier, and my own personal relationships, it started becoming clear. It was about that same time that I passed the Texas bar exam and now have a successful practice, none of which would have been possible without the removal of certain distractions in my life. Or as I would like to call in today's podcast, the big alcohol lie. All right, let's first talk about alcohol and domestic violence. Studies have shown that alcohol is involved in up to 40% of domestic violence cases. Alcohol can lower inhibitions, increase aggression, and impair your judgment, all of which can contribute to domestic violence. Now, remember what I said earlier. I'm not saying alcohol is the cause, but I am saying there is a correlation. Now, if you want to go back to my LSAT days, that's the law school admissions test, the thing you had to study for to go to law school. You learn logic, and one of the things they teach you is correlation does not necessarily imply causation. So, what are the causes of domestic violence? I'm going to say the causes are mostly power and control. The abuser's desire to have power and control over the victim, not alcohol. But when you have an abuser who has access to alcohol, when I say abuser, somebody who wants to have power and control over a victim, any inhibition in their brain can be, I guess you could say, lessened, and possibility of becoming aggressive is now heightened. And that's why I say alcohol is a correlation. Okay, so now let's talk about the dangers of alcohol. Alcohol can have devastating consequences for victims of domestic violence, their families, their children, and their communities. Victims of domestic violence who are also alcohol users themselves are more likely to experience physical and sexual violence as well as financial abuse. Let's think of it this way. Maybe because any sense of agency or desire to get away from an abuser, those inhibitions that are necessary to leave the abusive relationship are actually lessened because of the alcohol. So it's almost as if the victim is kind of drawn into a bad situation. So it's bad for the victim, it's bad for the abuser, no matter who's using it. They are also more likely, or the victim is more likely to stay in abusive relationships. Okay, something else I want to go into is I want to say it's our society, our lack of willingness, maybe that's the right word, to acknowledge this danger. Or maybe it's not naivete, but maybe we refuse to look at certain domestic violence situations through the proper lens. When I look at a domestic violence situation, I look at it through the drugs lens, through the alcohol lens, through the debt lens, through the power and control lens, through the lenses of physical and sexual violence, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, through the lens of using children, economic abuse, male privilege, coercion, and threats. Those are the kind of lenses that I look through. And that's why I feel I am able to see certain things. So maybe society, it's not that they have a lack of willingness, or maybe just, really good at sticking their head in the sand, and they don't want to see it. You see, our society's lack of willingness to acknowledge the danger of alcohol and domestic violence is a problem. Alcohol is often seen as a social lubricant, and it is often excused as a contributing factor in domestic violence, which is not incorrect completely. However, it is important to remember that alcohol is not a victimless crime, if you want to use that term of art. It can have devastating consequences for victims of domestic violence, their families, and their communities. When I use the word victimless crime, it's more of a term of art that I used as part of the creativity of this podcast. But, we all know, drinking alcohol by itself, as long as you're doing it within the law, it's not crime by itself. But it can lead to exacerbate certain things that would lead to a crime, like a DWI, for example. Okay, so let's talk about what can be done about it. We need to do more to educate the public about the dangers of alcohol and domestic violence. We also need to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions, regardless of whether they were drinking at the time. By taking these steps, we can help to reduce the number of domestic violence cases involving alcohol and protect victims and their families. Now, a few additional thoughts. I'm a former soldier. I took an oath to, defend and support the Constitution of the United States, which includes the amendments. And also, as an attorney, a licensed attorney, I took another oath when I swore in to also, defend and protect the Constitution. So I took the oath twice. So I'm not, but I would like to acknowledge, one thing I'd like to acknowledge is that alcohol is actually protected by the 21st Amendment. If you recall, the 19th Amendment created the prohibition, but it was repealed later in the 21st Amendment. So the 21st Amendment removed federal prohibition and just gave the right to legalize alcohol back to the states. So alcohol is protected by the 21st Amendment, which is part of the Constitution. So I'm not here to say the Constitution is wrong, nor am I advocating for its prohibition. However, I do believe we need to do more to educate the public about the dangers of alcohol and to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions. I believe that people should be able to make an informed decision about whether or not to drink alcohol and, exercise their 21st Amendment rights. And also, we need to make an informed decision about whether or not to tolerate a partner who chooses to over-exercise their 21st Amendment rights. It's okay if somebody wants to, exercise their 21st Amendment rights, which is the right to enjoy no prohibition. But when that exercise starts infringing on other people's rights, for example, a victim, because the perpetrator their inhibitions have been lowered because of the use of alcohol, and they decide to infringe upon the victim's rights by exercising power and control. So now it turns into a problem. So what I'm advocating here is informed decision. We need more people to understand how dangerous this thing is, how dangerous it can be, so they can make a better decision about whether or not they want to have anything to do with this. And that goes into my next part, the social norms of drinking. In our society, there is a strong social norm around drinking alcohol. It is often seen as the norm to drink at social events, and people who don't drink alcohol may feel pressure to conform. This can make it difficult for people who don't drink alcohol to say no, especially if they are worried about being judged or seen as a prude. Now, it is okay to say no. It is important to remember that it is okay to say no to alcohol, regardless of what other people think. You don't have to explain yourself or make excuses. You can simply say no, thank you, and leave it at that. If the person offering the drink keeps pushing, then don't hesitate to respectfully put them in their place a little bit if you have to. If they will not take no for an answer, then maybe you need to re-evaluate who your friends are. And this is one of my complaints is if someone offers you, Schedule 1 drug, you're not going against social norms to say no to that. But the funny thing is about when it comes to alcohol, it's almost like we have to have an excuse why we don't. Like, oh, I have to get up early for work tomorrow morning, or I have a certain medical condition, or it messes with my medicine, whatever. It seems like you're not allowed to say, I don't drink, because then, people might think, oh, you're a prude or whatnot. So it's just this weird, it's like the United States' weird relationship with alcohol. Now, here's my standard Miranda warning that I put in my podcast. If you're struggling with alcohol, there is help available. You can reach out to a therapist, counselor, or support group. There are many online resources available. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that's my little Miranda warning that I have to give when I'm making these podcasts about serious social issues. But I will say is reaching out to these groups, these therapists, nothing is going to get accomplished if you're not willing to put in the hard work and admit you have an issue. If someone's forcing you to go to those groups and you don't want to be there, well, you know what? You're probably not going to get anything out of it anyways. And that's just me being real. I'm also a CPS court-appointed lawyer. I'm sometimes appointed by the court to represent parents going through dealing with CPS. A lot of it has to do with their drug and alcohol abuse, and a lot of them are forced to go through services like take classes about why they shouldn't drink alcohol. And all I get is, without breaching confidentiality, I will say that it's possible all I hear is a bunch of complaints about the classes it makes you wonder if to get anything out of it. So you really just, I have seen some, I've seen parents who really truly want to change, and they do well, and they get their kids back, and I'm very happy for them. But, there's some of those parents who are kind of in denial, or they kind of bought into this whole big alcohol lie. They don't see it as a problem. They think they can control it, but, well, you know what? No disrespect, but I'm your court-appointed lawyer for a CPS case, so things are... Just the fact that I have to say that, things are already kind of bad. So, and I'm being empathetic too. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize the serious problems that other people are going through, or I'm not trying to say I'm not empathetic or I'm not concerned about their issue. But if they want to change, they have to really dig down deep in their gut and make that decision. I will say, though, for a lot of people, it's not always their alcohol addiction. I want to say necessarily genetic, A lot of it's environmental. So maybe just if you're in somebody's in a bad relationship where this partner is always pushing alcohol onto them, if that partner's not willing to change, maybe it's time to reevaluate your boundaries with that person, since it does not appear that they have your best interests at heart. Okay. In conclusion, I believe that we need to have a more honest conversation about the dangers of alcohol and domestic violence. We need to stop making excuses for perpetrators and start holding them accountable for their actions. We also need to educate the public about the dangers of alcohol so that people can make informed decisions about their own drinking. Okay, there's some great resources down in the web article portion associated with this podcast. I've got some phone numbers down to National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-HOPE, and the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, RAIN, at www.rainn.org. You are not alone. There is help available, and I hope this helps. Thank you for listening.